So maybe this is a good time to open it up to questions from the audience.
Well, I just wanted to mention in relation to these paintings, you talked about the bulls, but there's also the bull fighters.
The riders.
Bull riders.
Right.
Sorry, not fighters, bull riders. And that in some way was part of the chain of good provider.
Right.
Really not good provider. Like, is there any vocation that one could choose where you would be least likely to be able to support your family?
Right.
I hadn't thought of it like that. That's well, they used to get really, the statistics were that 1 of every 6 rides yields a very serious injury. It's a dangerous, like, bizarro thing. And I used to love going to Madison Square Garden, seeing the rodeo bull riding. You know, who would have known, you know? The first time I went to a cowboy store in Tribeca, the Billy Martin store, I think it was called, on Broadway, right near where your loft is. And I bought a big cowboy hat, and I was so embarrassed, you know, that I took it right off and put it back in the box until I walked home. And I said, I'm gonna wear it to Madison Square Garden. And but I kept it, you know, I was wearing like a beautiful, you know, Armani coat, you know, and I wanted to look like I was maybe the head of security, you know, but I didn't have the hat on. And then as we got in the cab closer to the garden, there were all of these families with millions of cowboy hats, you know, a sea of cowboy hats. And so I said, okay, I'll put it on. So I got out of the cab with the cowboy hat on and the black coat and, you know, boots, but not cowboy boots. I didn't have those. And there was this family, a Midwestern family, grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, grandkids. And Grandma looked at me as I got out and yelled out, look, there's a real cowboy.
Other questions? Lori?
Our question is the simplest of questions, and that is, when I look at them, they're very unified. They really, they have this energy that's really consistent within them, maybe a skew energy, but there's no mistakes. Everything feels like it proceeded in a really, everything went along. So I'm just curious about your process. Is there planning, or does it?
No, I never plan anything. I couldn't. That's a bad trait I have in other areas of life, you know. But I could never plan a painting. I mean,
you don't make sketches or studies.
No. I just get the doctor gloves on and dip my hand in and start making a shape. Or now I've been using palette knife. You know, just make a big wad of paint, like in that painting. You know, with the violet shape. You know, I just squeezed out every bit of every violet and magenta and those quinacridone colors I had into a big ball, you know, and just took mixed some medium in it and took the palette knife and just started, you know, making the shape, you know, with the palette knife. And, you know, you can wiggle it around and get those, you know, some of it transparent, and, you know, you could just, but I do that, and then sometimes I'll go around a piece in the shape, and in that, I'll just leave that. And then sometimes I'll leave it purposely raw and rough on the edge. Then I'll make it sharp, and it's fun to try and make a really good ellipse with a palette knife and thick paint. it's really, it's really fun to do.
Well, the consistency that Lori mentioned, maybe that has something to do with like the sense of the Borromini space, the bowls in space, that sort of.
It comes from everywhere.
Okay.
I mean, my last hero was Myron Stout. I just was nuts for Myron Stout, and I became friendly with him, and I just loved his work. And he would spend 10 years on one shape, literally, and just obsessively. And I loved the shapes. And, I loved great makers of ellipses and great makers of circles, I don't know why it appeals to me so much, but, and then it comes from other places. When I was a freshman in college, right at the end of my freshman year, I looked at a reproduction of this Rubens painting, The Rape of the Daughters of Leucippus. Is that it? That's Leucippus. And I made like an 8 by 10 foot or so painting on paper, drawing with some oil paint in it, but mostly turpentine and compressed charcoal or whatever it was. And I made it on the floor of my parents' garage.
And Arthur, that was like the abstract movement of the painting, right?
Yeah, it was an abstraction from that painting. It didn't look like the figures, but that experience. Well, Rubens is not, he's one of the greatest painters ever, but he's not someone I typically, look at. He's not one of my go-to people, but that experience of that Rubens painting was one of the most important experiences with a painting I've ever had. Yes?
Did you say that you painted those with your hands?
Yeah, completely. I had doctor gloves. I had the best doctor gloves. It's this brand called Halyard, which you can't get now since the pandemic, although I was at a doctor's office the other day and he suddenly had them. So I wanted to steal a box from him, but they didn't have my size. That orange, that beautiful orange in that painting is a lead pigment. I wear 2 pairs of gloves. I wear a smaller one that fits tightly and then another one that goes on top of that. And once I made a painting, we'll never do it again, with true vermilion, which is made from mercury.
Oh.
Vermilion. The real
yeah.
vermilion.
We probably don't get that.
Yeah, there are several brands that carried it for a while, that you could get in New York. There are 2 brands. One was an English brand called Michael Harding, and another, they had it, and another one was one called, it's made in California by this Russian woman and her husband. It's called Rublev, after the famous Russian painter. And they're located in California, and there's one art store in the city where they sell some of it, but they don't always have that color, but it's very interesting paint, but yeah, I'm careful. I can't tell you how many pairs of sneakers I've had to throw out, because I step in it.
Contaminated.
And what am I going to do? Sit there with a Q-tip and try and, scrape out mercury? I don't think so.
Steffi, you had a question?
I just wanted to say that I went to the Bonnard show with Lee today at Alcobella. And, everybody knows Bonnard is just such a master of color. And one of the things I find when I look at a lot of contemporary art is that the color, it just isn't working, right? But like maybe I shouldn't say this, but I went to see we went to see the Cecily Brown show today at the Met, and I felt it was really wanting, actually, in that department. And I just think your color it's just like you just get something. It just speaks to me, and it's...
Well, you should get a job at the Met then. And give me a show, right?
The color is just so beautiful.
Thank you. You made my day. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yes.
This is a really weird question. You don't have to deal with it, but because of some of the language in your earlier work.
Such as what?
When you wrote things on paintings and so forth.
When I what?
When you would write things on paintings.
Like disgusting,
Oh, yeah.
disgusting trait, for example.
Yeah.
How much does it matter to you and sweep you away to read the name of the color?
It's a big deal to me.
I think you love the name.
He does.
I do. I love the names of the colors.
Dutch, I bet you love them.
I bought that
Yeah,
paint. Did I say this? That raggedy brown color. That's Williamsburg brand color called Dutch brown, and I bought it sight unseen just because I thought I would be communing with Rembrandt.
I think it says, I could just tell that, part of your romance
Totally.
is the names of things.
What? What's that?
It's the
The name.
names of colors. Just ask anybody who's ever bought a lipstick. It matters a lot.
Right. There's one color that I've used a lot. It's called Scheveningen Violet by
Right.
Old Holland.
And you were discussing whether to use that as the title for the show, and would that put people off? Because how would they pronounce it?
I thought someone said that people would thought it was being arrogant because they wouldn't know what it was. But, this is it, and this is it, using my hands with the Dr. gloves and regular, turpentine, varnish, and stand oil, and, making, glazing it over in glumps. And this is that color, that same color that after you wipe it down with turpentine. And, what's interesting is, if you go to Amsterdam and you get out of the train station, and there's the sign to that town, and and I've asked so many Dutch people how to pronounce it. None of them pronounce it the same way, and it was apparently a test for whether there was a German spy, if they could pronounce the name of that town. But since it didn't work because everyone the Dutch people pronounced it differently, so they couldn't use it anymore. That's what I was told.
Well, the reason I ask is just because I think, the sensuality in these paintings has a lot of glee and a lot of balloon popping fun. But I also feel that, it is so deeply related to the experience. I love what Stephanie said, the experience of letting the color speak for itself.
Right, but it's also the titles of the colors,
Yeah,
that orange is called orange molybdate. Orange molybdate. And you're like a visual arts language individual. So, you would get that.
Sounds like a novel to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The names of the colors are fantastic.
I feel like we just ate a piece of cake together.
They what?
She feels like you just ate a piece of cake together.
Yes.
So we're about at 7 o'clock. Any other questions?
I just wanted to talk about
the humor serious question, and and I keep thinking about it in relation to these paintings now. It was like the first thing I thought of when you made that binomial kind of thing, and and then I'm sort of like thinking, well, is the color the humor part? But clearly that's not the case. So, I mean, they do seem like they have a very humorous side, though. I mean, they do seem to be somewhat balanced in that way, unlike maybe a lot of your other abstract work. So.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. Because I feel more liberated in these paintings than I've felt in the past. So I can just do stuff that I think is funny. Not, ha-ha, but, that seems amusing to me, and just for the sake of doing that. It's a good thing to do, but, I love the names, like that color, that painting is called Family Portrait. And it wasn't intended to be, but I looked at it and I said, that's Family Portrait. I'm the wrinkled up shape on the end,
On the
which
right.
I completely, after it was done, I completely redid the arc of it. It was straight up and down, and I turned it into like a bow from a bow and arrow. And I had to redo the point on the end, and I thought I would fail at that, but I didn't. And that painting has two different colors of real Naples yellow. One is like Naples yellow, and the other one is called Naples Yellow Paris for some reason. That's even more expensive, so it's like $100 for a tube of tan, whatever it costs. But
All your paintings involve extravagant shopping somehow.
and then the tax problems, right?
But yeah, the colors are like the
Yeah.
riches.
Yeah.
Glenn?
Yeah, I had a question. So clearly people can, look like as a species we're preoccupied with naming things, so whatever one does, someone might want to think of it with a name to explain it, I guess I would say. So forgetting about the fact that many people might do that to some of these and say, oh, this looks like that, or this reminds me of this season or something. I'm interested in your point of view on that. Are you, with a few exceptions maybe, but are you essentially trying to paint forms and paintings that minimize or eradicate the potential for someone to say, this is this or this is this?
I tend to feel a little uncomfortable now, having a thing too recognizable.
Like when you paint things out, or are you just literally trying not to paint things that lean into a reference?
I don't want it to look too obvious. I mean, it's very hard to escape any references if you're using, these kinds of forms. I mean, most people are going to see, like a phallus or a vagina, or, I've gotten that a lot, and
most of the forms in these paintings I don't have a reference for. Most of the time I think it's a shape or a penguin move.
there are not many like you.
But your position is to not intend that.
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, except, if I look at that red shape, which I suppose is my wife, I don't know, that red shape, I think of, that Rubens painting maybe, I think of, ARP shape, like ARP-like shapes. I think of a lot of different kinds of references, but somehow a lot of them come out body. Not necessarily in my mind, but in other people's
I feel like that painting might be the most specific that you're willing to sort of name.
Yeah, I looked at it and I said, family portrait. And then I thought it would, like, who's this? My wife would say, is this what he thinks, and
Right, but in general, like Glenn says, you're not wanting to.
No, I don't want to do it if it happens, what am I going to do, wreck the painting because someone sees, a dick in it? I mean, it's like, it's not, it's not
impossible, not out of the question, but
yeah,
but not the goal.
It's not the goal.
Yeah.
I mean, I put that middle, that tan color, that's like Naples yellow Paris right out of the tube, and sitting on top of the regular Naples yellow. By the way, there's a brand of paint called, that's made right a few blocks from, or they sell it a few blocks from here. It's called Vasari, VA, like the, the architect, Renaissance guy, Vasari classic oil paint. And they don't have that, they only sell their own paint that they make. But right outside the tan color, the Naples yellow Paris is their Naples yellow, which is also made from lead, incidentally. And the woman, I asked her, could I see the Naples yellow? And she looked at it and she got it, gave it to me, and she said, that is sunlight in a tube. Yeah. And so I named that painting Sunlight in a Tube. That has that same Naples yellow. So that's an answer to that question. That this shape, I didn't realize it when I made it, but if anything looks like a pickle, I love pickles too. If anything looks like a pickle, that's it. And someone told me that there were actually a lot of pickles in that painting. Right. And I made that painting, when the pandemic was first getting bad, and like, there's this color called swamp green that store makes, and it's actually a pigment. I'm sure it's not named that, but it's actually a pigment. It's not a mixed color, and I've used it in a lot of these paintings. It just looks like either vomit or diarrhea, or it looks like something nasty. But if you add some white to it, it becomes like this fantastic, it's like, it's this color, but if ever I want to have something that looks sickly for expressive purposes, that's my first go-to color.
I feel like maybe we should have cut you off when you said sunlight in a tube. Because I think we're past 7 o'clock.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I said before Sammy Davis at the Copa.